So everyone's heard of the Great Wall of China, but have you heard of the Benin walls? These walls were built completely by hand in the Benin Kingdom, which is present-day Nigeria. Now, the walls were built between 800 and 1400 CE. These walls were almost 10,000 miles long, about 9,900 miles long, making them 4 times longer than the Great Wall of China. In 1897, European invaders from Britain came to Benin Kingdom and they destroyed the walls. What took the Benin Kingdom hundreds of years to build took European colonizers only days to destroy. Not only did they destroy these amazing walls, they looted the Benin Kingdom and stole important Benin bronzes. Today, those bronzes are spread out in European and American museums. European colonizers wanted desperately to bury history, but they could never erase us. And if you didn't know, now you know.
Hello guys, welcome to today's episode. Today's episode actually is super powerful because there have been this discussion whether civilization started in Africa or civilization started in Europe. And if civilization started in Africa and Africa was rich and powerful with one of the most richest kingdoms at that time was from Africa, and that was actually the Mali Empire during the times of Mansa Musa. Then why was it that Africa was actually colonized? So let's go back to whether Africa was doing well in terms of civilization, trade, and also how the community of Africans were organized. And with even the evidence that is so much discussed, it's the Egypt Kemet. Africans built the pyramids, advanced mathematics, and even the history of Egyptian dynasties is still up to date. It's one of the strong dynasties that started as early as the 1st century. But I know that that is so much exposed. But let's compare this. The Great Wall of China. Some only know about the Great Wall of China. But do you know, at the same time that the Great Wall of China was built, it is when the greatest wall was built in Africa. And this was in the Great Kingdom of Benin. And this is actually what is the world's greatest wall to ever build before mechanical engineering actually came. And therefore, with those with those comparisons, you can really see even Africa, we were building the same things that were being built in China. Then of course, when we look at the Nubia kingdom, this is also one of the greatest kingdoms that at times it extended and conquered the Egyptian kingdom and dynasty, and it also extended its power to Saudi Arabia and conquered Saudi Arabia. This was actually known as the Kushite kingdoms, and even the arrangement of its political or leadership position still influence how politics is run or is being organized. This means that even in Africa, there was a very strong organization of politics and power. Then, of course, there is Azumi. Azumi was one of the greatest kingdoms mainly found in the present-day Ethiopia. And it is in this kingdom of Azumi that actually contacted and started practicing Christianity long ago before European came. And the European actually claimed that they are the ones who brought Christianity. But when you look at the times when the Azumi kingdom adopted Christianity, was long before the European actually came to Africa. So Christianity was never brought by the European. And that is why you will see in Ethiopia they have the old Bible, which is kind of different from the current that we are using. Then another kingdom is the Carthage in Tunisia, produced Hannibal, one of the greatest military general in history. And also in West Africa, empires like Mali, Songhai, and Ghana thrived on gold and trade. Timbuktu was a center of learning with thousands of manuscripts when much of Europe was illiterate. By the way, during the times of Mansa Musa, though Timbuktu libraries were not built by the Mansa Musa, but they were built by the Tuaregs and Berber, but it flourished during the times of Mansa Musa. Remember, this was one of the richest kings at that time. Even in Europe, there was no such man with such wealth. And he actually facilitated the learning in his kingdom by establishing libraries and even gathering teachers from Egypt and Arabs. So I feel that those who feel that maybe Africans would not have expounded in knowledge of discoveries, but if there was library at the times when in the European nation there was none, what makes you feel that Africa would not have expounded in knowledge of discoveries and innovation? Also in South Africa, Great Zimbabwe built massive stones. And of course, if you find time, there is a very precious building built by massive stone. And this was actually found in the present day Zimbabwe. In Nigeria, if I may repeat, the Benin Kingdom created bronze art and the massive Benin walls, larger than the Great Walls of China. And of course, the Great Walls of China was built around 700 AD to 1400 AD. The same time, the Great Wall of Benin was built. It was around 800 AD to. Therefore, this means that if Africa was not colonized, it could be as same or maybe more than China. It could be more even developed than China. Now, let's have this background information and see how was actually Europe different from Africa at that time. Africa had abundance of land, gold, rivers, fertile soil, and rich cultures. It didn't need to expand far for survival. On the other hand, Europe had scarcity, poor soil, fewer resources, constant population pressure. This forced Europeans into constant war with each other for the land and survival. That difference shaped history. And this is how we are starting the background. Why, if Africans was so powerful, why it did not go far to colonize Europe, and why Europe had an advantage in coming and colonize or occupy land in Africa. So that difference shapes our history today. Africa wealth bred stability and spiritual depth. Europe's scarcity bred warfare, strategy, and eventually aggression. So you can actually see the sense. Now you have wealth, and you have not a lot of scarcity. Therefore, you don't need to actually go outside. You don't need to actually be in a constant war. But when you have scarcity, you have to fight. You have to do extra things. And that is what Europe was doing. And by so doing, you find yourself that Europe developed a lot of war strategy, and Africa was actually stable and with spiritual depth. And this is how this is ridiculous, because most of the religion, they claim that they brought good religion in Africa, and they had scarcity. They were in constant war. Africa was stable with spiritual depth, but with that spiritual depth, they still say that they brought the religion with high spiritual connection. That is the world we are living today. Now, why didn't Africa colonize Europe? That is the big question. Despite the wealth, despite the stability, Africa had no need. They had plenty of land, resources, and wealth at home. Geography. Let's look at the geographical aspect. Africa interior was vast and hard to cross. Africa was built for land empires, not naval conquest. Europe geography. Many ports and short distances encouraged shipbuilding and exploration. African kingdoms often saw wealth in people and community, not conquest of foreign lands. In short, Africa did not colonize Europe because it didn't have the hunger nor naval drive. Europe, on the other hand, was actually desperate. So, I hope you get that sense. You get that background information. Then, why did Europe colonize Africa? It's actually like the same thing, but let's look at this perspective now. What are the advantages that Europe had despite them having scarcity? What the advantages did they have over Africa that made them easy to actually come and conquer? Despite we had said that Africa was the cradle of civilization. Africa had libraries, therefore they were intellectual, they built walls, and we are trying to say that Africa was much far ahead. But why did Europe actually come and colonize Africa? That is what we are looking about. The first advantage is the military technology. Gunpowder, rifles, cannons, later machines. Remember, these came spontaneous because of constant war in Europe. Therefore, they had, to extend their knowledge on war weapons or war technology. Then another thing is navigation, mastery of oceans, compass and map ships. Yeah, and of course they had this information early because their coastline had a lot of natural harbor than that of Africa. Industrial revolution. Factories needed raw material, cotton, rubber, palm oil and copper, and they did not have that, and they had discovered about industrial revolution. Remember, the industrial revolution actually started due to scarcity of early economies, like farming. Then you come to urban center, you will need industrialization. So therefore they needed to actually do industrial revolution, not like Africa. They had more of natural resources and fertile land. So in Europe they lacked that, therefore they needed industrial revolution. But when they did industrial revolution, they discovered that they don't have raw materials. Therefore there was need, and if there was need for exploration and go much far and try to get information about Africa, try to get that information. And when they got that information that Africa is actually rich in such thing like cotton, rubber, palm oil, and copper. So remember, don't get lost. We are looking at why did Europe had an advantage, or what made Europe to successfully conquer and start their capturing and colonization of Africa. And there is this very big factor is that the unity in grid, it's even used up to today. This actually happened in 1884 to 1885 at Berlin Conference. Europeans who had fought wars for centuries agreed to carve Africa peacefully among themselves to avoid another European bloodbath. And actually this unity of grid is happening even today. Each and every time black people try to unite in Pan-Africanism, they go, they discuss, they agree, they find a way to divide and rule. Each and every time they go, they form NATO, they form IMF to continue dividing Africa. That is something that I would say was the greatest factor, unity of grid. And on the other hand, I feel that Africans don't embrace this thing of forming allies. They don't. Each and every time we find Africans or divided in terms of tribes, they can't unite to get power. Divided by the border that were actually imposed onto them by the Europeans. They can't unite for power. Each and every time, diaspora war. Each and every time, black this versus black that. Unity of greedy for power. And when you get the power, you win it all. So that was one of the greatest factors that made Europeans be able to conquer and divide Africa. And now let's look at specifically Africa's weakness at that time. First of all was internal division. Thousands of ethnic groups and kingdoms, they were not united to defend themselves. Then of course the slave trade damage. Centuries of slave raiding drained Africa's population and destabilizes society. Yeah, this is actually a factor because you find that yes, there was some Africans did not for the wrongdoers, they did not want to do something like killing them. So what they did, they sold, they chased them, or they made them like slaves. And therefore, when the European came in need of slave, that culture continued extensively to now a particular kingdom capturing another kingdom, a weaker kingdom, then selling them. But the real factor is the strong men. We know that the Europeans were taking the strong men. That's why you find that people in diaspora who were enslaved were actually strong, because for actually surviving that brutality of slavery, you needed to be strong. For you to be shipped from Africa to Caribbean to Brazil to America to France to England, you had to be strong. Therefore, it's just the same as the brain drain. I would say that the strong men were already taken by slavery. So that's why one of the things. So by the time they were actually exercising power, we had lost so many strong intellectual due to slavery. That was one of the weakness. Another thing is there were no naval empire. They were just strong on land, but not at sea. Africans actually did not see the need for sailing. Therefore, they had no naval empires. Then there is colonial medicine and guns. You know, for long, the Europe had tried to enter Africa and try to conquer, but there was the difficulties they were facing, and that was malaria. But when they discovered the medicine and they already had the guns, remember Africa was stable, so mostly it used arrows for small raids. There was not much of big war, just small war, kingdoms versus kingdoms. So there was not a lot of need to innovate or invest in weapons. So colonization happened not because Africa was weak, but because Europe arrived at the right time, divided Africa, plus desperate Europe, plus advanced weapon is equals to conquest. But of course, there was resistance. Very strong resistance. And this was in Ethiopia, in a place called Adawa at that time. In 1896, they actually defeated Italy. And we have said that Ethiopia have had a strong history from the Azumi kingdom. Therefore, they were still united, and they actually won against Italy in 1896 in a place called Adawa. Then there is Zulu kingdom. Those are the heroes. In 1879, they humbled British. They really did. Despite the British having guns, they really did humble the British. Then there is Ashanti. Ashanti was in Ghana. The Ashanti kingdom was in Ghana. And then there is Majimaji. Majimaji was in East Africa, in a present day Tanzania. And many others, of course, resisted fiercely. But resistance was local and fragmented, while Europe was united in greed. So remember, the British could get help from other European powers. But you find that, like Zulu kingdom, they would not get assistance from other kingdoms. So there were no unity of kingdom at that particular point. And that is what is even bringing us down. We are still not united because of borders, because of our government, because of our experiences, because, I don't know, our ancestry. The black people, I feel that they still have a long way to go. And it's high time that we see this, that at times we may be different from different countries with different struggles, but we really need to unite for power. Now this begs the question that what do you think could have happened? There are those people who feel that if colonization brought more good because education, I don't know, some developments, and the question is, would Africa have been better if it was not colonized? If Africa had not been colonized, resources would stay in Africa. Congo's cobalt, Nigeria's oil, South Africa gold would have been fueled in African industry, not in Europe. Africa empires could have modernized. Like Mali would be like France, Benin like Britain, Congo like Spain. I feel that is what could have happened. Then there is culture and confidence. African languages, religions, and sciences would dominate global knowledge alongside Greek and Roman thought. Pan-African powerhouse. Africa could have looked more like China today, modern industrial, but rooted in its own culture. Then, of course, let's make this a simple conclusion. Africa was the first in civilization, pioneering knowledge, trade, architecture, and philosophy. Europe colonized Africa not because of superiority, but because of scarcity, desperation, and timing. Colonization interrupted Africa's natural growth. Without it, Africa might have stood equal or even ahead of Europe today. In truth, Africa did not need to conquer to prove greatness. It already was the foundation of civilization. Let me know what you think about this episode. I feel that this was great history, and let me know what you think about my perspective. Leave your opinion in the comment section. Keep the conversation going in the comment section. Until we meet next time, peace, love, and harmony.